for 911. Where's your emergency?
I think I'm going to faint. I think I'm going to pass out.
Nope, just breathe, okay? I'm going to stay with you on the phone until they get there.
Listen, please hurry. Please hurry. Oh, my God.
At 4:30 p.m., a call came through to 911. A woman on the other end of the line was pleading for help. Her voice trembled, and the words, "He's going to kill me," rang out like a cry of desperation. Police arrived at the scene 15 minutes later, but it was already too late. What they witnessed shocked even the most seasoned officers. Local media would later call it one of the most brutal crimes in Houston's history. Justin Miller and Camilla Harper were, by all appearances, the picture of a happy couple. Their lives seemed intertwined by fate, a perfect union that many envied. Justin, a 35-year-old firefighter, was the kind of man who commanded respect effortlessly. His tall, athletic frame, hardened by years of physically demanding work, and his calm, reliable demeanor made him a pillar of strength in his community. He was known for his dedication, not just to his job, but to his family and faith. Raised in a traditional household with strong moral values, Justin had grown into a man of principle and routine. His colleagues described him as loyal, protective, and deeply empathetic, traits that extended to his personal life. Despite the dangers of his profession, Justin had an innate ability to balance his duties with a warm, approachable personality that endeared him to everyone who knew him. Camilla, on the other hand, brought a vibrant energy that complemented Justin's steady presence. At 29, she had already made a name for herself as a talented photographer with an eye for detail and a knack for capturing emotion. She had a natural beauty that turned heads, long, flowing hair, striking brown eyes, and a radiant smile that seemed to brighten any room she entered. Her artistic sensibilities, combined with a bubbly and charismatic nature, made her a favorite in her social circle. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a certain reserve to Camilla, a quiet intensity that hinted at deeper layers. Friends often remarked on her ability to connect with people, though some noted she sometimes appeared guarded, as if protecting a part of herself from the world. Their paths crossed during a church service organized by a local community outreach group. Both were deeply involved in their respective congregations, Justin as a volunteer for fire safety education programs and Camilla through her charity work with underprivileged youth. Their shared commitment to helping others served as the foundation for their bond. Justin was immediately drawn to Camilla's passion and creativity, while she admired his selflessness and strength. Their courtship began in earnest, filled with long conversations about their dreams, shared values, and plans for the future. Within months, they were inseparable. Justin's family welcomed Camilla with open arms, impressed by her charm and warmth. His mother even described her as the perfect match for her son. Their wedding took place exactly 1 year after they met, a celebration as grand as their whirlwind romance. Camilla was a vision in her flowing white gown, her every movement exuding grace and elegance. Justin stood proudly by her side, his love for her evident in every glance and gesture. Friends and family gathered to witness the union, filling the air with laughter and joy. The ceremony was flawless, but for those paying close attention, there were subtle signs that not everything was as idyllic as it seemed. Camilla, despite her radiant smile, appeared unusually tense at times. Her gaze occasionally drifted off during quiet moments, and she seemed preoccupied, as if wrestling with something unspoken. Justin, oblivious to these nuances, was fully engrossed in the excitement of the day. To him, their marriage was the culmination of everything he had ever wanted, a partner who shared his faith, his values, and his vision for a stable, loving home. He proudly introduced Camilla to extended family members, speaking about their plans to build a future together. Guests left the wedding with nothing but admiration for the couple, convinced they were witnessing the start of a lifelong love story. Yet even in those early days, there were cracks beneath the surface. A few of Camilla's close friends privately expressed concern about her apparent unease, noting that she seemed unusually distant during moments of celebration. Camilla herself brushed off any inquiries, attributing her behavior to wedding jitters. She avoided deeper discussions, preferring to keep the focus on their shared happiness. Justin, ever trusting and devoted, saw no reason to question her explanations. To him, she was everything he had dreamed of, a loving, intelligent, and beautiful wife who completed his life in ways he never thought possible. The truth, however, was far more complex. Behind Camilla's poised exterior lay a secret she had carried for years, one that she feared could unravel the carefully constructed life she had built with Justin. It was a burden she bore silently, a shadow that grew heavier with every milestone they reached together. While Justin envisioned a bright future, Camilla's thoughts often lingered on the past, a past she had worked tirelessly to leave behind but could never fully escape. After their grand wedding, Justin and Camilla embarked on a carefully planned honeymoon to New Orleans. Justin, ever the romantic, had spared no expense, ensuring every detail of the trip reflected his love and commitment. The couple stayed in a boutique hotel near the French Quarter, a location chosen for its charm and proximity to the city's vibrant culture. Their days were filled with sightseeing, candlelit dinners, and leisurely walks along the Mississippi River. Justin seemed completely at ease, savoring every moment of their new life together. He often remarked to friends later that the honeymoon felt like a dream, a brief escape from reality where everything seemed perfect. Camilla, however, displayed a different energy during the trip. While she participated enthusiastically in the activities Justin planned, there were moments when she seemed distracted, as if her mind was elsewhere. During dinner at a high-end restaurant, Justin noticed her staring blankly at her glass of wine, her expression distant. She quickly recovered when he brought it up, attributing her behavior to exhaustion from the wedding festivities. Throughout their stay, she often retired early, citing fatigue, leaving Justin to spend some evenings alone in the hotel lounge. These moments of solitude were not enough to raise suspicion, but they planted the first seeds of doubt in Justin's otherwise trusting mind. Returning home marked the beginning of what should have been the happiest phase of their lives, settling into their roles as husband and wife. They moved into Justin's modest but comfortable home, a one-story house in a quiet neighborhood. The house, meticulously maintained by Justin, became a shared space where they planned to build their future. At first, everything seemed to follow a natural rhythm. Justin returned to work at the firehouse, while Camilla resumed her photography business, which she operated out of a small studio she rented downtown. They spent weekends hosting barbecues for friends and family, a tradition Justin cherished. But over time, subtle changes in Camilla's behavior began to surface. She frequently worked late, often citing last-minute client requests or extended photo shoots. Justin, initially supportive of her dedication to her career, started to notice inconsistencies in her stories. On more than one occasion, he dropped by her studio unannounced, only to find it dark and locked. When asked, Camilla always had an explanation, an equipment malfunction or a canceled appointment, but the pattern became harder to ignore. Her growing absence extended beyond work. Camilla began withdrawing emotionally, avoiding intimate conversations and deflecting questions about her day. Their evenings, once spent sharing stories and planning their future, became quieter. Justin, ever attentive, made efforts to rekindle their connection, planning movie nights and cooking her favorite meals, but her responses were lukewarm at best. When she did engage, her laughter felt forced, her smile strained. By the third month of their marriage, Camilla's phone became a source of tension. She started guarding it closely, keeping it on silent and turning it face down whenever Justin was nearby. When it buzzed during dinner or late at night, she would step out of the room to take the call, offering vague explanations about work or personal matters. Justin's questions about her phone habits were met with defensiveness, further deepening his unease. The couple's physical relationship also began to suffer. Camilla, once affectionate and playful, grew distant, often citing stress or exhaustion when Justin tried to initiate intimacy. On rare occasions when they were together, she seemed preoccupied, her mind clearly elsewhere. Justin, though deeply in love, couldn't ignore the growing chasm between them. He started confiding in close friends, describing his confusion and frustration, but his trust in Camilla prevented him from probing further at that time. Despite the mounting red flags, Justin chose to attribute the changes to the natural adjustments of married life. He rationalized that they were both navigating new responsibilities and pressures, and that things would improve with time. However, the cracks in their seemingly perfect life continued to widen, unnoticed by those around them. To the outside world, they remained the enviable couple, but inside their home, tension was beginning to simmer beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt. Justin's suspicions had been building for weeks. The late nights, the guarded phone calls, the increasingly distant demeanor, these were not things he could continue to ignore. It wasn't in his nature to pry. He valued honesty and trust in a relationship. But the growing inconsistencies in Camilla's behavior pushed him to a breaking point. On a cool Friday evening, while Camilla was out with friends, Justin decided to confront his unease head-on. Alone in their quiet home, he sat in the living room, his mind racing with unanswered questions. The laptop on the desk in the corner caught his eye, a device Camilla rarely used around him but always seemed to carry with her. After a moment of hesitation, he approached the desk. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the laptop and entered the password he had seen her type countless times. It worked. The desktop was cluttered with folders, some labeled with innocuous titles like work or projects, but one stood out, personal. Justin clicked on it, unsure of what he might find, but compelled by a growing sense of dread. Inside, the folder contained a series of subfolders, many of them dated years before he had even met Camilla. At first, the contents seemed harmless: old photographs, scanned documents, and saved emails. But as he scrolled through, something caught his attention, a set of photographs that didn't align with the image of the woman he thought he knew. The pictures were of a young man with strikingly familiar features, a resemblance to Camilla that was too strong to ignore. Confused, Justin opened more files. Among them were letters and medical records, documents detailing a process he hadn't anticipated: Camilla's transition from male to female. The name on these documents wasn't Camilla Harper but Kevin Harper. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman he had married, the person he had shared his life and dreams with, had been keeping an integral part of her past from him. He felt a rush of emotions: confusion, anger, betrayal. For a moment, he simply sat there, staring at the screen, his mind struggling to process the weight of what he had uncovered. The past few months now seemed to make a twisted kind of sense, the pieces falling into place in a way that only deepened his sense of shock. Justin didn't stop there. Driven by a mix of disbelief and determination, he continued searching through the files. He found more evidence: correspondence with friends and therapists, records of surgeries, and legal documents confirming a name change. Each piece of information felt like another strike against the image of the life he thought they were building together. By the time he finished, the laptop screen had gone dark, and the house was eerily silent. Justin sat back in the chair, his hands gripping the armrests as he tried to calm the storm brewing inside him. When Camilla returned later that evening, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. Justin was sitting in the living room, the laptop closed on the coffee table in front of him, the documents he had printed spread out in plain view. The tension in the room was palpable. Camilla's eyes darted to the papers, and her expression shifted to one of realization and dread. Justin's silence was more menacing than any words he could have spoken. The confrontation that followed was explosive. Justin demanded answers, his voice rising as he paced the room, the printed documents clenched tightly in his hands. Camilla, visibly shaken, attempted to explain, but her words only seemed to fuel his anger. She admitted that she had kept her past a secret, not out of malice but out of fear: fear of losing him, fear of rejection, fear of not being accepted for who she truly was. But to Justin, it wasn't just a secret, it was a betrayal. The more Camilla tried to explain, the more Justin's emotions spiraled out of control. He felt as though his entire relationship, his marriage, had been built on a lie. The life they had been creating together now seemed like a cruel illusion. The woman he had loved and trusted had hidden something fundamental about herself, and he couldn't reconcile that with the person he thought he knew. The room seemed to close in around him, the air thick with tension and unresolved anger. As the night wore on, the confrontation only grew more intense. Camilla pleaded for understanding, but Justin's mind was already consumed by the weight of his discovery. The relationship they had spent so much time building now felt irreparably shattered, the trust between them obliterated in a single night. Neither of them could have anticipated how this revelation would alter the course of their lives, but in that moment, the seeds of tragedy were irrevocably sown. The confrontation between Justin and Camilla escalated rapidly, fueled by the tension that had been building for months. The living room, once a space of comfort and togetherness, had become the stage for an argument that spiraled out of control. Justin's voice echoed through the house, his anger boiling over as he accused Camilla of deceit and betrayal. He paced back and forth, his gestures becoming increasingly aggressive, while Camilla stood frozen, her face pale with fear and exhaustion. She attempted to explain herself, her voice trembling, but her words seemed only to add fuel to Justin's rage. As the argument intensified, Camilla's defensive posture shifted. She recognized the volatility of the situation and tried to de-escalate, backing away slowly toward the hallway. Her movements were deliberate, each step calculated to put distance between herself and Justin, whose demeanor had become increasingly erratic. His accusations grew louder, his tone sharper, as he hurled verbal assaults at her. Camilla's breathing quickened, and she glanced nervously toward the stairs leading to their bedroom. Her instincts told her that the confrontation was no longer safe. Justin's fury had reached a breaking point. In the heat of the moment, his rationality dissolved, replaced by a visceral, uncontrollable rage. He abruptly stormed out of the living room, his heavy footsteps reverberating through the house as he descended into the garage. The sound of the door slamming shut echoed ominously. Camilla, now alone in the silence, hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Her mind raced with thoughts of escape, but before she could act, she heard the garage door creak open again. Justin emerged holding a hammer, his grip tight, his knuckles white. His expression was a terrifying mix of anger and resolve. He climbed the stairs with deliberate, measured steps, his gaze locked on the bedroom where Camilla had retreated. She had managed to close the door behind her, but there was no lock to secure it. The only place of refuge was the adjacent bathroom, and she moved quickly, shutting herself inside and bolting the door. In a panic, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Her voice, trembling with fear, pleaded for help, the sound of her words barely audible over the pounding of Justin's fist against the bathroom door. The dispatcher attempted to keep her calm, but the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Justin's pounding turned to forceful blows as he began using the hammer to break through the door. Camilla's cries for help grew louder, echoing in the confined space. The dispatcher urged her to stay on the line, but Camilla's voice became a frantic whisper as the sound of splintering wood filled the air. The doorframe cracked, and Justin forced his way inside. What happened next was a blur of violence. Justin raised the hammer and struck Camilla, who attempted to shield herself with her arms. She stumbled and fell to the floor, her phone slipping from her grasp. The connection to the dispatcher remained open, capturing the horrific sounds of the attack. Justin's blows were relentless, his actions driven by blind fury rather than conscious thought. Each strike left blood splattered across the tiled walls and floor, the brutality of the scene escalating with every moment. By the time Justin stopped, the bathroom was unrecognizable, transformed into a nightmarish tableau of violence. Camilla lay lifeless on the floor, her body motionless, the hammer discarded beside her. Blood pooled around her, soaking into the bath mat and seeping into the grout of the tiles. The house, now eerily silent, bore the marks of the chaos that had unfolded within its walls. Justin was found sitting on the blood-soaked floor of the bathroom, his hands resting limply in his lap, streaked with the evidence of his actions. His expression was blank, his eyes staring vacantly ahead as though he was detached from the horror around him. When the police entered, guns drawn, he offered no resistance. The hammer lay discarded beside him, its handle slick with blood. The officers moved cautiously, their training preparing them for hostility, but there was no fight left in Justin. He allowed himself to be handcuffed and led out of the house without a word. His silence was unnerving, as if he had already resigned himself to the reality of what he had done. The scene inside the house was chaotic and grim. Crime scene investigators moved methodically, photographing every detail: the broken bathroom door, the blood-streaked walls, and the phone lying on the floor, its 911 call still connected when officers arrived. The bathroom floor was slippery with blood, the pool around Camilla's body darkening as it dried. Outside, neighbors gathered, their whispers punctuated by the wailing sirens and the occasional bark of police orders. A single white sheet covered Camilla's body, but the brutality of her final moments was unmistakable in the splintered wood and shattered glass that littered the bathroom. By the time Justin arrived at the station, his clothes had been replaced with a standard white jumpsuit. His blood-stained garments were bagged and tagged as evidence, alongside the hammer. Fingerprints, DNA samples, and swabs were taken, though there was no question of guilt. He had confessed to the dispatcher and had been found at the scene. During initial questioning, Justin remained mostly silent, his responses minimal and devoid of emotion. Detectives noted his flat effect, interpreting it as either shock or the deep resignation of a man who knew his life was over. News of the crime broke the following morning, splashed across local headlines with grim descriptors like a love story turned tragedy and nightmare in suburbia. As the details emerged, Camilla's identity as a transgender woman and the violent manner of her death, the case ignited a firestorm of public debate. Advocates for the transgender community decried the murder as another example of the pervasive violence faced by trans individuals, particularly trans women of color. Vigils were organized in Camilla's memory, candles flickering in the night as mourners gathered to demand justice and change. On social media, the conversation grew more polarized. Some expressed outrage at the brutality of the act, condemning Justin as a monster incapable of controlling his rage. Others disturbingly framed him as a victim, arguing that he had been deceived and emotionally manipulated. The arguments spilled over into televised debates, where commentators dissected the case from every possible angle. Gender identity, societal expectations, and the fragile constructs of trust in relationships were all laid bare for public scrutiny. The police investigation was swift but thorough. Autopsy results confirmed the severity of Camilla's injuries, multiple blunt force trauma wounds consistent with the hammer, including several fatal strikes to her head and upper body. The attack had been brutal, relentless, and intentional, leaving no doubt in the minds of investigators about Justin's intent. The forensic team matched his fingerprints to the weapon and documented the extensive blood evidence tying him to the scene. Witness statements from neighbors corroborated the timeline, with several reporting sounds of a violent struggle and the arrival of police. Camilla's life became a focal point of the investigation, with detectives piecing together her journey from Kevin Harper to the woman she had become. Friends and family described her as kind, creative, and fiercely resilient. They painted a picture of a woman who had overcome significant obstacles to live authentically, only to have her life tragically cut short. Camilla's transition became a point of interest for both investigators and the media, though many criticized the invasive nature of the coverage, arguing that her identity should not overshadow the violence she had endured. The evidence against Justin was overwhelming, and within days of his arrest, prosecutors announced they would seek a first-degree murder charge. The case became a lightning rod for conversations about accountability, masculinity, and the intersections of violence and identity. Public opinion was sharply divided, with rallies and protests forming on both sides of the debate. The trial promised to be a highly publicized spectacle, but for those closest to Camilla, the focus remained on mourning the loss of a vibrant life and seeking justice for the horrific way it had ended. Meanwhile, the house where the crime occurred remained sealed off, its once pristine facade now marked by yellow police tape. Neighbors avoided the property, unnerved by its grim association. What had been a symbol of new beginnings for Justin and Camilla was now irrevocably tied to a tragedy that would haunt the community for years to come. The trial of Justin Miller began 6 months after the murder of Camilla Harper. The courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and activists who had followed the case closely. The prosecution presented a straightforward argument: Justin had acted with premeditated intent when he retrieved the hammer and attacked Camilla, and his actions demonstrated a calculated disregard for her life. They detailed the brutality of the murder through forensic evidence, expert testimony, and the harrowing 911 call recording, which was played for the jury. The recording captured Camilla's desperate cries for help and the sounds of her final moments, leaving many in the courtroom visibly shaken. The defense team sought to mitigate Justin's actions, arguing that he had been driven to an uncontrollable rage upon learning of Camilla's past. They presented him as a man of strong traditional values who had experienced profound emotional distress, which they claimed impaired his judgment. Psychologists testified on his behalf, describing his mental state at the time of the murder as one of extreme shock and betrayal. The defense's strategy hinged on framing Justin's reaction as a tragic but understandable response to what they called deception within the marriage. The prosecution countered these arguments by emphasizing the deliberate nature of Justin's actions. They pointed to the time it took him to retrieve the hammer from the garage, arguing that he had ample opportunity to reconsider his choices. They also highlighted the fact that Camilla had retreated to the bathroom and called 911, showing she was clearly attempting to escape, yet Justin had pursued her with unrelenting violence. Medical examiners testified that the injuries inflicted on Camilla were consistent with prolonged and intentional acts of aggression, not a momentary loss of control. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a verdict of guilty on the charge of first-degree murder. Justin stood silently as the verdict was read, his expression devoid of emotion. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families of both Justin and Camilla, the verdict brought little solace. Justin's relatives struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the brutality of his actions, while Camilla's family and friends were left grieving a life stolen too soon. In the months following the trial, Camilla's death became a rallying cry for advocates against violence toward transgender individuals, particularly Black transgender women, who face disproportionately high rates of violence. The hashtag Justice for Camilla gained traction online, with thousands sharing her story and calling for systemic change. Vigils and protests were held in her honor, drawing attention to the urgent need for greater protections for the transgender community. Camilla's friends and supporters described her as a kind and vibrant soul who had brought joy to those around her. They focused on preserving her memory as a beacon of strength and resilience, rather than allowing her legacy to be overshadowed by the circumstances of her death. The Harper family established a foundation in Camilla's name, dedicated to providing support and resources for transgender individuals facing discrimination or violence. The foundation also worked to raise awareness about the importance of acceptance and the dangers of prejudice, using Camilla's story to educate communities about the human toll of intolerance. Within a year, the foundation had launched programs offering legal assistance, counseling, and safe housing for those in need. The house where the murder occurred remained vacant for years, a silent witness to the tragedy. Neighbors avoided it, the memory of the crime casting a long shadow over the once quiet street. Eventually, the property was sold, but the new owners found themselves fielding questions and whispers about its history. For those who had lived nearby, the house became a grim symbol of how fear and ignorance could spiral into violence. Camilla's story became a lasting reminder of the importance of honesty and acceptance in relationships and communities. It highlighted the destructive power of secrets and the need for empathy in understanding the complexities of identity. As her name continued to be invoked in discussions about equality and justice, Camilla's life and legacy became a poignant example of the work still needed to create a world where everyone could live without fear of rejection or violence. The case left an indelible mark, not only on the community of Houston but on the broader conversation about gender, identity, and the necessity of compassion in a fractured world.